Thanks for staying tuned to Channels Television. This is The World Today. I'm Cynthia Are. Here are our top stories at this hour. Now, as more West African countries and some international countries continue to take precautionary measures against the spread of the Ebola virus, Liberian soldiers have set up a blockade stopping people from western regions affected by the Ebola outbreak from entering the capital, Monrovia. It follows the president's declaration of a state of emergency to tackle the outbreak that has killed more than 930 people in West Africa alone this year. In Sierra Leone, the security forces have now imposed a complete blockade of eastern areas hit by the virus. It is by far the world's deadliest outbreak, and the two-day World Health Organization meeting will decide whether to declare a global health emergency. Let's listen to how the situation was addressed by the Liberian government in the just concluded U.S. African Leaders Summit.
Liberia's Vice President Joseph Boakai, who headed the Liberian government's delegation at the U.S. African Leaders Summit, hosted a town hall meeting for Liberians in Washington at the just concluded African Leaders Summit and discussed the health crisis gripping Liberia due to the spread of the deadly Ebola virus.
Let them have us informed.
Earlier in the day, Liberia's President Johnson Sirleaf, who had opted out of attending the high-profile summit to deal with the epidemic, declared a state of emergency to last 90 days with effect from yesterday. Vice President Boakai used the town hall meeting to brief Liberians in the diaspora and the Friends of Liberia about challenges Liberia is facing, especially with regards to containing the disease.
People were dying and family members from Foya and the surrounding villages were going there for funerals. And of course, once you went to those funerals, some of the people who came back, reports came that almost some families were wiped out after they came. So we started through the Ministry of Health putting in restrictions.
Boakai also stressed the importance of educating the public who were critical of the government's assessment of the disease.
They began to deny that some of the deaths were caused by Ebola, or that Ebola was even that fatal, and that people, the Liberian thing, people were trying to scheme up to eat money. It was not true. But then the denial went into attack on the personnel, the health workers. Whenever there was a body, and they stopped them from burying the body, and the same group there, they attacked the group, and they wanted to take possession of the bodies. In fact, one time in Foya, the youth were in arms against some of the health workers. So the health workers themselves became very concerned.
Though Boakai stressed that his country was in a state of emergency and has been through a lot, he said the government of Liberia was making headway, citing one biggest problem, the surrendering of the dead infected bodies to authorities to avoid the further spread of the virus.
Over the last couple of days, it is reported that a lot of bodies have been now. People are calling. Instead of them going to them, they are calling to say, come and pick up the body.
The outbreak in Liberia is the world's worst Ebola outbreak so far, with the death toll now at 932.
Now, still talking about the Ebola virus, health ministers from the Southern African Development Community met yesterday in Johannesburg to work out ways to prevent the spread of the virus, as well as prepare for an effective response to an Ebola outbreak if necessary. Present at the emergency meeting was the WHO coordinator for the Ebola outbreak response, that's Francis Kasono, who briefed the group and answered questions of efforts made so far. Our South Africa correspondent Betty Dibia has this report.
There's been no recorded case of the Ebola virus disease in southern Africa, but health ministers from the region seem to be taking notes from development in West Africa, and they say this meeting is about precautions and indeed preparedness to respond if required. On hand was the WHO Ebola Outbreak Response Coordinator for West Africa, Dr. Francis Kasono, to give the health ministers a view from the ground.
Although the transmission from person to person is not very high in terms of Ebola, that would suggest that you be prepared because of the volume of travel that we are seeing throughout the sub-region.
The outcome of the meeting included responsibilities for the SADC member states, partners and stakeholders, as well as the WHO.
It is critical that the region put in place preventive measures to ensure that there is no Ebola outbreak in the SADC region.
British Airways has suspended flights to some West African countries, but South African Airways, with the most frequencies from the SADC region to West Africa, says it will continue flying.
Here in South Africa, we've already been screening people using the thermal scanners. We've already selected hospitals here that we are busy preparing in case, just in case, there's any patient who has got Ebola. It's not going to go to any hospital. We've already selected the hospital, we are busy preparing them. And each of the countries here is going to do so. So some of these processes have already started long ago. We just need to coordinate to make sure that it's not only one country's ready, it's all of us who are ready.
Apart from what's being done within the SADC region, there's expected to be information sharing across regions. South Africa is deploying a mobile laboratory to help out in Sierra Leone next week. The Southern African heads of government are expected to take the decisions and issues further when they meet in the middle of next month at the Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. From Kempton Park in Johannesburg, South Africa, I'm Betsy Dibia reporting for Channels Television News.
Now, has Oscar Pistorius been doing nothing but lying through his teeth? Well, that's what the main prosecutor in the trial of the athlete has been saying, and he's also reiterated that he cannot avoid a conviction for murdering his girlfriend. Gary Nell accused the athlete of being a deceitful witness who told the court a snowball of lies. Mr. Pistorius denies murdering his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp, and he still says he mistook her for an intruder, but the prosecution says he deliberately shot her after a row. The prosecutor, Gary Nell, made his concluding remarks today, with the defense due to follow tomorrow.
South African athlete Oscar Pistorius arrived at the High Court in Pretoria today, Thursday, for the resumption of his murder trial. The court was postponed until August the 7th for closing arguments. Pistorius stands accused of shooting and killing his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp on Valentine's Day 2013. Pistorius, a double amputee athlete, could face life in prison if he is found guilty of murdering his law graduate and model girlfriend. South African State Prosecutor Jerry Nell asked the judge in Oscar Pistorius' murder trial to reject the Paralympic and Olympic track star's defense because it was devoid of any truth. Nell started his closing arguments by saying the defense case vacillated between two contradictory lines of argument. The two defense cases presented by advocate Barry Rue were that the Paralympic and Olympic track star didn't have criminal capacity and that if there was, it was in self-defense.
We say, my lady, it's a state's case that the accused was a deceitful witness. The court should have no difficulty in rejecting his core version of events, not only as not reasonably possibly true, but in essence as being absolutely devoid of any truth.
Pistorius, who had his lower legs amputated as a baby, is accused of murdering his girlfriend, Miss Steenkamp, at his home in Pretoria on Valentine's Day. If he is guilty, he will be behind bars for life. Since the trial opened in early March, Mr. Nell has portrayed Pistorius as a gun-obsessed hothead who shot 29-year-old Steenkamp 4 times through a locked toilet door where she was taking refuge after a heated argument. The defense team says the track star was a vulnerable and caring boyfriend who killed Steenkamp in a tragic accident after mistaking her for an intruder hiding behind the door. Pistorius sat impassively through the opening minutes of the proceedings, which are expected to last 2 days. After that, Judge Thokozile Masipa, who has more than 4,000 pages of evidence to review, will retire to consider her verdict.
To other stories now, sadly, a fresh wave of violence in South Sudan is dragging the world's youngest country closer to a humanitarian catastrophe as a global body bolsters its military presence there. Now, Edmund Moulay, the UN Assistant Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, warned council members that militia violence in South Sudan has displaced more than 1 million people, and almost half of them have fled across borders. The widespread displacement has been compounded by hunger and food problems. Almost 4 million people are at risk of going hungry amid growing concerns of famine, and up to 50,000 children are at risk of dying of acute malnutrition this year alone.